great to have him on our side.
Yes.
I just ask this because when you look around this room, I think the average age is probably over 63 feet, and yet, looking at you, this question and how it gets resolved about it, teaching science in classrooms is really pretty young. What would you say to a group like this about how to gauge your generation in this kind of fight? Because you're the ones that are going to lose the most, will be gone in 10 years.
So there's.
Repeat the question.
So she's wondering how, because this is a different age group than mine, how do we pull the kids from my age group around in this fight? And that's sort of two problems that we have with that, which is the first is that kids are in school, often also teachers and professors, and so each year we go to legislature, they schedule it on the last day of my exams, and they kept me there till 6 p.m. that day, so I had to leave and I was going to go edit an exam, and I had to leave for an hour, send it off, and I didn't have time to do anything, just send it off because I was going to be there till 6, 7. And it was it was a sacrifice that I was going to make because I was doing this and I had to do it, but my friends were all tested. It was there's not much, I can afford to skip out on this kind of stuff, but most kids can't just be like, okay, I'm going to pick up a lead class and just go. And neither can professors and neither can teachers. And they schedule it purposely on those days to make sure we can't bring our people out, which is one problem. Having said that, the first year, we managed to get a lot of kids out. And most of them were my friends who came out for me. And then they saw the whole little letters thing, a lot of other stuff from these elected officials, and also the testimony of the creationists who talked about the science the scientists didn't know about. And they went, this is insane. This is our elected officials, this is science policy in our state. And we didn't have any idea that this was like this. And it's something that I had learned a year before dealing with. We had people who the local religious right group sent out people who claimed Columbine, evolution for Columbine, and tried to use that to convince our state board of education to throw out textbooks. So I sort of knew what was coming, but they didn't have any idea, and were really furious about it after they had sat through that first hearing, and came back the next years because they couldn't believe that this still existed, and were honestly just as irritated as I was now that they knew what was happening. So making kids aware about this is a big thing. The other issue with this is just science is much less immediately tangible to a lot of these kids. Is cutting $35 billion $80 billion from science over a decade. If I'm a high school kid who may be going to go into a chemistry PhD in 10 years, I may not get a grant until I'm 45 now, but they're not aware of that as a kid. And so it's hard to make it directly part of their life. Or if it's on something like creationism, they don't know that their rights are being violated, or if they know it, they may not care. And if they care, they may not know what to do, or they may not be brave enough to do anything. And it's really tough to break those barriers. So that's sort of what we're struggling with right now. So the best we can do is show kids what's happening, and hope it gets them riled up enough to actually fight it.
Strategically, you're focused a lot on the sort of appeal and trying to sway elected officials, but the history of this topic is a lot in the courts. And so, are you guys, working within the courts or bringing a legal challenge, or what is causing you to go for a repeal through that channel instead of challenging it?
So initially, it just made much more sense for me. I've never been taught creationism, and it was more. This was just. So I would not be a plaintiff myself as it stands. So it was more that this was wrong. It needed to be fought, and the best way for me to fight it, rather than working up some sort of legal challenge, is just. And it was sort of a naive thing at the time where I know I'm right. I know this is science. Surely everyone will agree with me because it's the right thing to do. It was sort of a simple calculation. I know I'm right. It shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that hard for everyone else to do the right thing. And then I slowly learned that no, the right thing is not what everyone else does all the time. And so, but that was the initial genesis of doing this legislatively. And as time's gone on, it's better for the state if we repeal this legislatively. It's better to, it may be even faster at this point to repeal in the legislature. Say if it takes us 5 years to repeal it, it may take us 5 years or 10 years to go through a court case. And it's not a fun thing to do. And so if there's a court case that happens, it'll happen. But as it stands, we'll keep fighting this fight. It's a good thing to organize around nationally, because this is really ground zero of where the creationists have come out. They've sent creationist lobbyists down from the Discovery Institute in Seattle, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a national creationist think tank that's responsible for drafting all this legislation and pushing it around the country. And so it's really where this fight's happening. And so, you know what, we'll keep fighting it, we're gonna win. They've been slowly cracking under the pressure. They really don't like the international news, and they went after me. They were very angry at me personally for causing bad publicity. I was like, you're sort of missing the point. The bad publicity is not because of me, it's because you have a bad law. If you get rid of the bad law, the bad publicity will go away. So they were really angry. They used it as an excuse to go put me on trial for causing them bad publicity. But despite all this, we are making progress, and we're going to win, and they know we're going to win. And so it's really a question of who wants to be on the right side of history, who wants to be on the wrong side of history, and they can make their choices. And that's sort of how we see it right now. But a lot of it, the other thought on a lot of it's happening in the courts, it hasn't changed public opinion. And that's ultimately what needs to change. I mean, the last Gallup poll said 46% of Americans thought the Earth was formed in the last 10,000 years. And even if that number's off by a little bit, which I think it probably is, that's still, we'll be generous and say, hey, only 35% of Americans think the Earth was formed in the last 10,000 years. That doesn't sound much better, does it? And so we do need to change. That's sort of, it's a good, making this a battle with the legislature is a good way to just, we try and change public officials' opinions, and try and change the public's opinion at the same time. And if we win one, we win the other. And so that's how we sort of going about this.
Yes?
You mentioned the vouchers going to the schools that taught creationism. Are you aware of whether or not creationism has been being taught in like normal schools in Louisiana because of this law? I mean, I know there's always going to be some teacher somewhere, even if it's illegal, that's going to teach creationism, but has this already opened it up? And
So we don't know what's happening on a micro level in Louisiana, and they use it as an excuse to avoid voting for us, which is you can't give us schools that are doing it. The thing is, the way they've set this law up has made it very, very hard to figure out what's going on in the schools. Teachers are allowed to use supplemental materials, anything they want, until they are stopped. And the way they get stopped is they go to this five-member panel at the State Board of Education, and now 2 members of this panel are appointed by the governor's Department of Education, which will vote for the creationist materials. 1 member is appointed by the teacher who used the material. So that's 3 votes on this 5-member panel already. It gets even better. The last one, the 4th vote is appointed by the publisher of the supplemental material. So that's 4 votes. And the last one's appointed by the student complaining. So you got 4 to 1. And maybe those 2 votes on the DOE are okay, but probably not. If they're appointed by Governor Jindal's people, then they're going to be creationists, because Governor Jindal's made his support of creationists quite clear. So it's really hard to challenge these materials. What we do know is what's happening at the school board level. So we found school boards who are teaching both sides, who are the Living Superior School Board, who wanted the critical thinking and creationism in the classroom. We've had another school board, Tangipahoa, bring in speakers about what this law is for, and teaching intelligent design in the classroom. We've had parishes in Louisiana that have literally they've created their own policy. They created a policy like this law beforehand that was basically outlining the legal argument that you can teach legitimate controversy over evolution as long as it's scientific, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And so we know it's being used, we just don't have the name. We don't have the names of the individual schools. Now, the legislature's point to us was, well, until there's a legal case, this is a good law, right? And so, which is a really sad point. It goes back to y'all's earlier. It's like, at what point does it become worth it to him with a lawsuit? And who knows? One day that might happen. And so that's sort of what we're waiting to see what comes out of these schools, and we're looking at some of the schools I've hit a bunch of public records requests last week, and I'm going to hit a few hundred more as time goes on. And we'll figure out what's actually happening in these schools. Hey, if they want me to investigate the schools myself, then you know what? I'll do it. If that's what it takes.
Yes, ma'am.
Today was the first time I heard the connection between the climate change deniers and the fight in creationism. I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm well aware of the Koch brothers' involvement in local politics. Has that been an influence today in Louisiana? Are you actually getting climate change denier money thrown into this whole mess?
So the big push in Louisiana came from the creationists. And it started, so the reason these two are linked is because creationism got in trouble, or the challenges to evolution got in trouble at first because it singled out evolution. And so they went back to the drawing board and thought, hey, we don't like climate change either. We also don't like the origin of life, and we don't like human cloning, we don't like all these things. So let's throw them in there so they can't say we're singling out evolution. And I'm sure people in the NCSE could give the history better than I can, but what it looks like it's gone through now is basically the climate change denier people said, wait, we like this idea. We don't, like, y'all are challenging climate change, that's when people join in. So now we've actually, for the first time ever this year, we saw a bill in Kansas that didn't target evolution, it only targeted climate change on the exact same model of the Louisiana law. It was actually really interesting to see that the evolution of this anti-science policy and how it's working. And so there appears to be some collusion and some just, they're both doing it. They both don't like science, and so they'll attack their version of science they don't like. And on the other hand, there is some help from evangelicals who may not like evolution, but are aware of climate change, and so will help us on climate change, even if they want to fight us on evolution.
Dave?
In New Mexico, we had a sort of a Shakespearean tragedy with our former Senator Harrison Schmidt and moonwalking astronaut. And back in 1998, he was on the side of science and evolution, and he helped us elect Marshall Berman to the State Board of Education. And there's a great picture of Marshall and Harrison Schmidt and various people from the New Mexico Academy of Science down in Greenway. Dad's dinosaur down at the museum. But since then, Harrison Schmidt has fallen to the dark side and really latched on to climate change denial. He's had a big brouhaha with Mark Boslow on basically, Harrison Schmidt came out and said, well, the Arctic sea ice has recovered since 1989. No, it hasn't. And there's plenty of real data to show that. And so there's an amazing video on climate change crock of the week, which shows Harrison Schmidt endorsing Bobby Jindal's Louisiana Science Education Act because it, gets that critical thinking into the classroom. And this critical thinking is how the Discovery Institute is selling the whole thing. And one of the things that got me to recommend you for our speaker this year was your comment when somebody said, well, shouldn't we have more critical thinking in school? And you said, well, we already have critical thinking. It's called science.
It's like, you only need a law, like you don't need to mandate critical thinking in science class because that's sort of how science is supposed
So
to work.
the Schmidt tragedy sort of shows how you can fall into the dark.
I think, in all fairness, Harrison Smith, in my opinion, something's going on in his head because he is totally different than he was 10 years ago. I think he's just, yeah. Lisa?
Can you speak to how motivated many of the conservatives are towards backing this type of legislation, the anti-science legislation, because that's the only way that they're electable?
So, I guess I'll approach this in a little bit of a different way, which is, it's not just that they're electable. A lot of them just truly believe that we should not be teaching evolution in the classroom. It's the way of the heathen, and it causes Columbine. And there's people who truly believe that. So there's that group. So there's really three groups. So there's that group who just truly, this is we're going to do it for like, this is what we truly believe. We should just throw out all evolution. There's a second group, which is the Discovery Institute, which has about a $5 million budget and a lot of six-figure salaries. And I don't know how many of them truly believe it. I can't be in their heads to tell you what they all think. They make quite a bit of money off of it, and they don't. And so they're a research organization supposedly, except when you look at their tax returns, they don't do any money on research. They spend it all on salary, and the money they say goes to research goes to more people's salary. They just funnel it away and then spend it on other. They funnel to another organization to spend on salary. So there's that group, and then there's people who are sort of the marginal. So we have this man from Metairie, Louisiana, which is outside New Orleans. it's a conservative but more well-educated, like, it's not a creationist area. And he's not a creationist at all. But he's voted against us once, and now as the chairman of the Senate Education Committee, he's used his privilege to just not vote at all. And each year, he's justified himself by saying, well, you can't prove the law is being used, so I'm just not going to vote. I would tend to agree with you, creationism shouldn't be taught, but I'm not going to challenge this law. And it's like, and so that's sort of how the clever legislator panders to the creationist, which is, he won't pull Bobby Jindal and go out, I want creationism in the classroom, let's teach Bobby Jindal called intelligent design the very best science. And so he's not going to do that. He's getting, it's very dangerous for some of these legislators in a conservative primary if they get challenged on this issue. And so he's being hands off, giving them what they want, but pretending like he's being reasonable. So that's sort of the issue we have there.
Steve?
Yes, so Zach, I'm gonna ask you what I asked my former students in the what are you studying now, and where are you gonna be in the future?
So I'm currently taking a break from Rice for about a year or two. As of right now, I am a history major there, and I have about a year or two left, depending on how long I want to take and how much time I have. And in 5 years, I have no idea. And in the next year, I want to see a nonprofit off the ground, really get this into a manageable state where there's people who can handle, like, who can sort of be on the ground response to silliness in a more aggressive manner than already exists. So the NCSE is sort of a nonprofit, and it'd be nice to have our nonprofit. It'd be nice to be able to take sort of more political, get a action committee and take a more political side to it too. And on top of that, it'd be nice to, we also want to focus more on DC maybe, I think is where we're going. And so it'd be nice to get all that off the ground in a place where I can really say, okay, we've got people handling this, now I can think about going back to school and doing, like, like, really just get everything organized. And once I do that, we'll have a more clear future.
I was curious, you were in the public schools, is that correct?
Yeah, I graduated from high school.
Okay. I was curious what you experienced there that kind of set you on this path. You had like one or a set of incidents or?
So it was actually, I was very lucky to go to school at Hawkeye. All my teachers were highly offended by this law too. It was more that I grew up in a political family, and so I knew the day the law passed. My dad would come home and be like, they're trying to pass a creationism law. This is just silly. And we just thought, oh, because we knew Jindal, he's smart. Like, you can say a lot of things about Bobby Jindal, you would never call him stupid. Say he's sort of lost a moral core maybe, but he has a biology degree from Brown. He's a biology degree from Brown. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He's a brilliant man. Like, it's quite clear he's brilliant. And so we always assumed, well, look, we know the governor. He's smart. He's not he's not going to sign this law. It'll be fine. And then one day, Bobby Jindal goes on to CBS News and calls intelligent design the best science and signs the law and has defended it ever since.
He's been running for president since that opportunity arose.
Yeah. So there was that, and so I knew the day it passed, and I couldn't believe it. And I just sort of said, well, why don't we have someone why don't we bring an astrologer from New Orleans up to a classroom and put them in the class? Because technically under this law, it's a supplemental material, it's completely reasonable. It goes back to the Kitzmiller trial when Michael Behe had to admit astrology was just as legitimate as intelligent design. And so we thought about that, like something that could we do that? And for years this is funny, someone's probably gonna do it one day. And I was waiting, and no one did it, and I was waiting, and no one did it, and then I said, well, I'm a senior in high school, I'm about to leave. I don't know if I'm going to stay in state, I don't know what I'm going to do. And this is really, if I don't do anything now, I won't have to do anything. And so I had a senior project class that I had to do to graduate high school, and I said, well, this is what's really interesting to me. Why don't I try and lead a repeal campaign for this project? And I got allowed to do that, just got going, been on that path ever since.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. As far as people in your group are concerned there in Louisiana, how many of them are interested or can be motivated to run for some of these offices in the state to start replacing some of these backward-minded folks?
So I'm not sure on that one. We've got a lot of, our groups, in Louisiana, it seems to be mainly composed of teachers. We have a lot of teachers who've been helping us. I don't, they may be willing to run for office, I'm not sure. But I've never really asked about that. Right now, I think what I'm gonna push for next is rather than an office, we've got, each year they try and throw out our biology textbooks. We won that battle in 2010 at our State Board of Education and got good biology textbooks adopted. And because we won that, the creationists were highly upset, and creationist legislators have tried now 3 times to overturn that decision and take away all power from our state board to decide textbooks, because hey, if they decide on good textbooks, we won't allow that. And so we blocked it 3 times. But this 3rd time, they managed to get it put in a study committee where they're gonna look at it. So now, I think the next step is getting our people onto the study committee. And that's the first step to maybe getting people involved in a position of power on this issue. Is at least a minor appointed position on the textbooks is a good start for us.
Good.
Anybody else before we go back to, yes,
Well,
Cindy?
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, how are you gonna get people on that committee? But I got 2 questions. And then the other
One
one
per
is,
customer, I'm sorry.
well, I kind of know. Those people on those committees, these senators and people that are talking to you who are so sadly ignorant, how do you get them to, how do you get these people to talk to each other? I mean, maybe you personally can't do it, but how does that happen when they're talking different languages?
So some of them we hope we can educate, we hope. There may be a few, or we get them. The other issue is not just not being aware, but also just being brave. And so we convince some to be brave. We help the few who can learn. And then we hope the rest get voted out of office. Because they're never gonna, some of them, Senator Ben Nevers, for example, who at one point was the head of the Education Committee, our first year, who sponsored the Louisiana Science Education Act. He's a very nice man, I get along with him very well, but he is never going to vote for us. It's not going to happen. Or Senator Frank Hoffman, another sponsor of the bill, who's also the one who's behind throwing out our textbooks. We don't want Senator Hoffman in office, or not Senator, Representative Hoffman in office. It's because he's never going to vote for us. And one day we may be in a position to affect these elections. That's what we hope for. But on this board right now, there's like 13 members, and some of them get appointed by, say, the teachers unions, who I'm close with some of the people doing the appointing, so maybe we can get a few people who are sane onto the board, and that will be enough to help stop any insanity from happening there.
And Ben?
You've mentioned textbooks quite frequently. APS and their infinite wisdom, that's Albuquerque Public Schools, has decided that social studies and science is no longer going to get textbooks. They're all going to do discovery ed and internet resources. What are your thoughts on that?
So I don't know that much about internet resources. The issue is, and so, I mean, I know the argument behind internet resources is, well, if there's the best lecture ever, let's have everyone see it. But the problem is these lectures aren't always great. And so one that's a lot of people use is Khan Academy. And he may be really good on some things, but he did the thing that